right, I think we'll go ahead and begin. Welcome to our very first Life Odyssey session here at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Davis. My name is Susan Steinbach, and I'm very happy today to host our wonderful guests, Jane and Will Lauder, who are the first ones in this series. We're going to present another one in 2 weeks, and then 2 weeks after that, and then through the end of November. And some of those wonderful honored speakers are in the room, like Dorothy Foytuk will be speaking. The Kopics will be speaking. And have I missed anybody in that grouping? Lois Grau will be included, and John and Nancy Eulerman will be in those groups coming. And we're really looking forward to doing this because we have so much wisdom in our congregation, so much life experience, that it's an opportunity for us to soak it up, to absorb it, and learn from it. So this was the purpose in putting together this series. It's been done before, about 10 years ago, when Chris Fry was on our ministry. And now we're doing it in a more expanded way. So as you see, the camera's going today. We hope to have this as part of our church archives. And have a copy for Will and Jane as well, because they're very, very special people with such fascinating histories. So before we start the event, it's going to go kind of like a fireside chat. I'll be posing questions to Jane and Will and passing the microphone to them. And we'll just kind of go through their lives chronologically. And then I'll be posing fixed questions that they've heard in advance that we would love to hear their responses to after they've kind of walked through their life chronologically. And then, in maybe the last 15 or 20 minutes of our time together today, we'll take questions from the audience. And they will be very happy to interact with you, and you can ask those burning questions that don't get answered in the regular session. So are there any questions about our format before we begin? We have a couple of other honored guests in the room, and that would be the sons of Will and Jane. Will, would you like to introduce?
Yeah. I'd like to introduce Scott Lauder. He's been very helpful to us, and he lives up in Paradise.
Yeah.
And
My other two of our brothers will be here shortly. They're
Yeah.
en route. My younger brother Rick and one of my older brothers Mike.
yeah, right. Rick and Michael will be here later, and we'll introduce them then. Okay? Oh, that's right. Jane just reminded me to say that our oldest son, Don, just went back to Tanzania, Africa, where he's been working on development, and so we're very proud that he chooses to work in Tanzania in projects there, which are very, very needed. So he was here up until about 4 or 5 days ago.
No, Sunday he left, or Tuesday or Wednesday he left.
Yeah.
Ron is on his way back to Tanzania. All right, so let's begin. I'm reading here from the Davis Wiki. We've put a framework around this, which is posted on the table over here next to Scott, along with other memorabilia, that Will has received numerous awards and honors for his service to the community. He was honored as Davis Citizen of the Year in 1971. With his wife Jane, they received the City of Davis Peace and Justice Award in 1991, the Liberty Bell Award for work in civil liberties and human rights from the Yolo County Bar Association in 1993, and the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Davis Martin Luther King Scholarship Committee in 2005. So I think they need some applause. So let's start back towards the beginnings of your life that led eventually to so many accolades in your 60s, 70s, and 80s. Let's start back to where you were born and what communities you grew up in. So Jane, would you like to start?
I was born in Berkeley, lived there all my life until I moved to Davis. And we were not a part of a church, but a part of many other things. That's that.
I was born in Alameda, and across the estuary, and I was lucky enough to meet Jane at UC Berkeley, and the reason she went with me was because I had a beautiful collie dog. She told me that. She said, yeah, well, I wasn't so interested in you, but that dog got my attention. So we had that collie for a long time, so I was glad that I had him so that Jane would go with me.
Talk about Star a little more.
Yeah, well, he was wonderful, and he lived a good life. He died when he was about 12. And then somebody said to me, oh, so you got the collie, now you're stuck with Will?
So this is when you were on the campus at UC Berkeley,
Right.
and Will was on the football team,
Yeah.
right? And were you captain of the football
I
team?
wasn't captain. I just felt good to be on the team. And I also played baseball at Berkeley, and was pleased to be on a team that won the national championship, and we beat Yale. And I guess who was on first base for Yale? George Bush. And he went 0 for 7 at the back. He didn't get one hit. So I enjoyed telling that story.
That's George the First.
What?
That's George the First, not the.
George Bush.
Yeah.
Right.
It's a senior, not
George Bush Sr.
George Bush Senior.
Fascinating. All right, so campus life was very active for you. I noticed over in the yearbook there's a lovely picture of you being the queen of the sorority sisters.
That's right.
I don't like to admit to those things. Oh, okay. Yeah, but it was true.
And what sorority was it?
I was Alpha Phi.
Alpha Phi.
Yeah.
Alpha Phi.
My father always used to love to say she's an Alpha Flea. And Will is a Sigma Noor.
So, Will, what was it about Jane that caught your eye?
Well, she was beautiful.
Still is.
I did remember seeing her, and it was one of those special holidays where they, parade down Bancroft Way, and I did see her, and I had a friend sitting next to me, Audie Morris, who was going with a young woman who was one of Jane's best friends. So I worked the deal. I said, Audie, how about get me talk to Marilyn and get me a date with Jane. And by Georgie did it. And she loved my collie, so she stayed with me for, and somebody said, what happened when Star dog, our dog died, and she was stuck with me. Still, she's stayed with me despite the fact that we don't have that beautiful dog anymore.
I remember you telling me too that dog would follow you around campus.
Yes.
And if you got separated from Star, she would come into the library and seek you out. Those were the days before the regulations of no dogs on campus.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right. In fact, Star would sit in class with me, sit right up in the seat next to me, and the professors were very wonderful. They would even acknowledge that nice dog sitting up there in the third row. And Star was very well behaved, so he never got in any trouble. He went to all my classes with me, and the professors were very kind and usually would say something to welcome Star to the class that morning. So that was great. It was at Berkeley, of course, where both Jane and I met.
You might tell them about the Star's connection to the football team too, about leading the team.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, one of the fun things was that when I was playing football at Berkeley, my coach, Pappy Waldorf, he was wonderful. He allowed Star to come in the dressing room with us before the game, and he would even let Star go with us when we ran out of the tunnel onto the field. And so I would tell my mother, who was a piano teacher, and she lived in Alameda, and I said, Mom, be sure and listen to the announcer this coming game. Star's going to lead us out onto the field against Oregon. And sure enough, my mother said yes. The announcer said, oh, and there's a beautiful collie dog running on the field with the Berkeley team. So that was fun. He was well known all over the campus. That dog. He was such a good dog, and we enjoyed having him. And as I said earlier, unfortunately, when he died, Jane was stuck with me.
I understand, Will, that you played at the Rose Bowl for Cal in 1948.
That's right.
Graduated in 1949, so it was quite a illustrious sports career that led to his professorship here in physical education at UC Davis. But there's one more football story I'd like to share from those early years that you told me about, and that is Will's mother, who was a music teacher, saw him play only once, if that's correct, and she had an interesting comment about the event.
Which was, do you remember what she had so many comments. I'm trying to.
Lost the game.
Yeah, that's right. That's Susan. Yeah, that was when I was coaching, and she was up in Chico at a piano conference that day, and she came that night to the game, and unfortunately we were upset. We lost the game to Chico, and everybody was sad, and oh boy, long faces, and including me. And so when we got together outside the dressing room, my mother made a typical comment about when she said, well, Willard, that was the name she used for me, which is my full name. She said, well, Willard, just think how happy you made those other boys feel. I was so down, I'll admit that made me laugh. Okay, that's it. I did make those other boys feel happy. And I want to take this moment to say our son Rick just came in back there, and we're glad to have you with us, Rick. So we got two of our four sons here today, Rick and Scott. Mike is coming.
All right, great. Why don't we talk now about the transition to coming to UC Davis and being asked to join the faculty here and the era of Emil Marak, who was former chancellor. Would you like to tell us about that time in your life?
Yes, that was, we were fortunate to come when Emil Marak was the chancellor. And he was such a wonderful man, and the kind of man that you could go in and talk to, about any or everything. And one of the things that that I want to say is that he supported, when I said that I was interested in the Peace Corps, after I'd been on the staff for, about 15 years, I was very, very interested in the Peace Corps. And I had mentioned to a Peace Corps staff person who had come out from Washington, we were training Peace Corps volunteers in the physical education department. And I had mentioned to this staff person, I said, if I was single and, 21 and I would go in the Peace Corps in a minute. I think it's a wonderful program. And the staff person said, "Oh, you could go. We take staff, we take family." And I know I rushed home and told Jane. I said, "Do you want to go? Do you want to go in the Peace Corps?" And poor Jane just about, flipped because we had 4 boys. I don't know how old Don was, our oldest one, then, probably around 12 or 13. So that was the beginning of our adventure with the Peace Corps. And eventually we did go with all 4 boys. Speaking of our 4 boys, 3 of them are here now. Michael just walked in. So Michael's here, and Rick and Scott. And John can't be here because he's in Tanzania, which is just above Malawi, if you aren't familiar with East Africa. And he's doing work on development there, and we're very proud that he's doing that work there.
So Emil Murak gave you a leave of absence to join the Peace Corps from 1965 to 1967 and
Right.
take your 4 boys along with you to Malawi. Quite an amazing event, and you'll see that on the table back there, some of the articles about it. And in that time period, Jane wrote many, many letters home to her neighbors on Sunset Court. And that resulted in a publication called To Africa with Spatula. Let's hear from Jane about that unintended book that she produced in that time period.
That was really a fun thing to do, and I'm so proud of it. We brought one, it should be there, yeah. You can look through anytime you want. And the reason for the spatula is, it always takes explaining. We wanted to have some way we could have the Peace Corps volunteers into our home anytime, and we decided that breakfast was the best thing because you have pancakes and just stretch them and stretch them and stretch them and have all the ingredients on hand. So we started our Sunday morning open houses, which was so much fun. And Will's mother thought that since we were so far away, we should have every magazine that was ever published, I think, in the United States. And she sent us everything, Sports Illustrated and all these things. And so kids would be lying all over the living room, reading magazines and listening to records, and it was really, and eating lots of pancakes. So that was the spatula in the title.
And your key friend back home on Sunset Court was Pat.
Pat Allen.
Let's talk about Pat in a moment. Yes.
Pat was the one who said, "You've got to make this into a book." She saved all my letters, and she had people sign out for them. I'd write these lengthy letters, and a lot of them were with carbon copies. Remember carbon copies? They were awful. And so Pat decided that I really should make them into a book, and so she helped me. And it was wonderful because she knows exactly what I mean, and if I say something that doesn't come out right, she knows exactly what I mean. It's a perfect kind of a person to work with, and she laughed at all my jokes. And so she helped me do the book. We went just chapter by chapter, working them out, and every page of that book has been back and forth across Sunset Court at least 10 times, if not more.
Some of the stories in that book, let's just have a show of hands in the audience who has actually read that collection. Such a marvelous collection.
So,
Wonderful stories in there. And I remember in particular the story about the newborn baby that was born to the cook or the caretaker on the property, and then the baby was covered with black substance of some kind. You want to talk about that?
Yeah, the black stuff the baby was covered with. The black stuff was called mankwala, which means medicine in the African language there. And it looked horrible, it was horrible. And so our moss who worked for us, his wife had a baby, and she was born very, very small. She was only less than 5 pounds. But some of them, we had some in the orphanage that were 3 pounds or 2 pounds when they were born and lived. It's amazing. And so I called the Peace Corps doctor as soon as this baby was born. I said, can you come out and check the baby? And he came right out. And that was Gary Stewart. Maybe some of you knew Gary in Sacramento. Anyway, he said, well, check the baby a lot and take the mother's temperature. I said, okay. So he left it like that. And the baby was born just on the cement floor in this little house behind our house. And so I ran downtown as fast as I could, and I bought blankets, and I bought a bassinet and wicker things, and had so much fun. I got diapers and all this stuff. But every time I go to check on the baby, it was lying on the cement floor. And the chair, the nice chair, was piled up on the bed with all the nice blankets piled on top of that. It's hard to have people learn a whole new way of living, you know. And I didn't want to be too bossy. I just wanted to let them live as they wanted. But it was quite an adventure.
Yeah, Susan, I just want to say, with 3 of our sons here, and just comment on what an impact that experience had for all of us. We had never, Jane and I had never been out of the country, and even not very much out of the state. So going to the little country of Malawi, you know, many, many thousands of miles away, and Malawi was very poor, and had a desperately large population of people who were extremely poor, but they were rich in the strengths and the values of African people. They were friendly. They would give you the shirt off their back. Even though they didn't have much, they would share it with you. We learned so much and gained so much from living amongst the Malawians, and the whole family was impacted. And as I said already, our oldest son Don is back in that area. He's in Tanzania working on development. He got his PhD at UC Davis in agriculture, and he's working in that area there. So it was such a impact on our family to live and find out what it was, what a real, I don't even like to use the word poor, but to live amongst people who didn't have many art things of value, but they had great attitudes, wonderful, very generous, open to helping, and we just learned so much amongst them. Do you want to say anything about that, Jim?
And Will, would you explain exactly what you did when you were there?
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to get a leave from UC Davis, and I give so much credit to Emil Marak. He was so wonderful about approving my leave, because I really didn't want to leave the position that I had in the physical education department, and not have to come back. But I was going to, I remember saying to Emil Marak, well, I'm going to go, whether or not I have a leave to be able to come back. We've made our decision and I want to go, so we're going to go anyway. And Marak was so wonderful. He said, well, your position will be here when you come back from Malawi. So whenever you come back, you can have your position back. And I asked for an extension while I was there. We were having such a wonderful experience, and they wanted me to stay on for another year, for 3 years. And so I sent a message to Emil Marak that I'd like to stay another year, and he approved it right away. So I give great credit to the university, and especially to Marak, that made it possible for us to have a full experience in Malawi.
Let's bring that Peace Corps experience forward in time and talk about now what you've done here at the Unitarian Church to continue your connection to that country and the Malawi Children's Village. Some of the activities done with the religious education program here. So do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that was fun for us to go to the Sunday school class and tell about the kids in Malawi and how there weren't often enough blankets for them, and we did a little skit, and we had one of the kids.
Get right up there as well.
Yeah, where's their mother?
Hope Raymond?
Oh, Hope Raymond.
Hope or Betsy? Betsy.
It was, I think it was Hope.
Hope, okay.
Anyway, she, we put a gunny sack down on the floor and said, Hope, lie down and see if this is nice and warm and comfortable for you. She said, ooh, no, it's cold and it's itchy. And I said, well, that's what happens to kids if they can't get blankets. They sleep with just gunny sacks or anything over them. And so that just set them in motion, and they started collecting it. I think I brought a poster, it might be there, pennies for blankets for Malawi. Yeah, that's, yeah.
Yeah,
There it is.
once you bring that up,
There it goes.
And we were able to get lots of blankets. We didn't get them here because it's too expensive to send. That's sort of falling apart, I see. We had a little flood in the playroom where that was. Anyway, thank you, Beth. So,
let's see, while we're at it, why don't we recognize
You did,
Scott?
I'm
Oh,
here.
you did already. Did you say that Mike just walked in? Stand up,
stand up,
Mike.
Mike.
Yeah, that's right. Let's see, Scott, how old were you in Malawi when we got there?
We left Washington, D.C. on my 8th birthday. So I had my birthday in Washington, New York, and transatlantic to London. So I had a birthday cake on TWA flying across the pond.
How old were you, Mike?
When I was 11, when we got
Yeah.
there.
Don was
I
12,
was 12.
and Rick, you were 3.5, right?
Yeah, turned 6 on the way home in Hong Kong.
That's where Rick got inspired to drum, was in Malawi. Hearing the drums at night on the mountaintop.
And I thought the novelty would wear off, but guess what? How old are you now?
Oh.
51. I've been playing drums for 47 years.
He's a professional drummer and drum teacher, so it didn't wear off.
You might mention a couple of the people. One of your Peace Corps volunteers that became pretty famous for writing a lot of books, and also who the director of the Peace Corps was that a lot of people have heard of.
Yeah, Sergeant Schreiber.
Yeah.
So why don't you talk about that?
What's that? You could say.
Well, that's all right, I'll say, I guess. And Paul Thoreau,
Yeah.
he was one of our Peace Corps volunteers that ran into trouble in Malawi, and Will didn't send him home, the president of the country sent him home. He became involved with a rebel party, and they were good folks, and you know, we didn't blame them at all. But as a Peace Corps volunteer, you can't become involved in anything like that, especially politically in the country. So that was quite an interesting time. But Paul Thoreau has written many, many books. You've probably read a lot of them. Wonderful guy.
Thank you. All right, let's move forward in time to the era in your life where you became very involved with the Davis Religious Community for Sanctuary, also known as DRCS. And are there others in the room
Yeah.
that witnessed and participated in that time period? Yes. This was when Guatemala in particular was under siege, that indigenous Mayans were escaping to Mexico, crossing into the United States, and seeking sanctuary in the United States. So tell us how you became involved with that.
Well, it always starts, at least our experience started with getting to know someone, you know, who was in danger and running for his life, and that's what happened. We were told about this young man who was fleeing from Guatemala with, you know, his family had been persecuted. His little house had been burned down. His mother was still alive, but the report was that his father was dead. So we heard the story, and we brought this young man into our home. And all of you would do the same thing. Once you hear the story about what's going on, and then you have someone who has witnessed that experience, that changes your life. And so we realized that there were lots of people coming across the border that were seeking sanctuary. And there were many sanctuary churches springing up around the country. And so we, I forget the name of the minister that was so wonderful from Berkeley. Yeah, from Berkeley, and then there was one from Washington, and we had them come and talk about what was going on. So we joined the sanctuary movement, Davis Religious Community for Sanctuary. And this church signed on, as did many churches, the Episcopal Church, the Community Church, Catholic Church, and so we had support in terms of the churches in town to develop this sanctuary program of helping people who were fleeing the violence in El Salvador and Guatemala.
What year was that?
That was in the 80s, is that correct?
Yes.
1980s.
And I want to make it clear, that
82.
was against that violence was primarily aimed against the indigenous people, the Mayan people of Guatemala. And so we became friends with so many wonderful people that were fleeing from Guatemala, especially because the majority of the people, there weren't that many Mayans in El Salvador, but as most of you probably know, or many of you know, Guatemala had an immense population of Mayan indigenous people. That was their country. They were indigenous to that country. So we became very involved, and that began our trips to Guatemala to understand more what was going on and to find out what we could do to assist people fleeing from Guatemala.
And Jane, you told me that this time period you would describe as how to live a life of crime. Because assisting the fleeing Guatemalans was basically illegal. Granting them sanctuary or a safe haven was illegal in the time period. And as you participated in driving these individuals from one city to another as they worked their way up to the state of Washington, something about you needed to use an old crappy car because if you were arrested, they would impound the car. Could you tell us a little bit more about that?
Well, we used as old a car as we could find, whoever would volunteer to drive. And then we had to have some way, we couldn't let anybody know where we were going. And sometimes there were addresses. And so I just devised, I have a hard time keeping a secret, so I wrote down the address of whoever it was on crackers, crackers or gum wrappers, anything like that. And so that, you know, well, it was hard, especially for me. And we had to use public phones instead of using we found out that our phones were probably all tapped, all of us in sanctuary. So we'd have to go to a payphone, and it was pretty funny. I'm not very good at living that kind of a life. I didn't do very well. But I don't think I gave away any big secrets. I think it was okay.
And you had two Guatemalans living with you for a couple of years, is that correct?
Yes, that was, and of course that was educational experience for our whole family to have them living with us. And I want to say that, you know, being involved in the sanctuary program, there were some people, good people, who believed that we shouldn't do that. And they were in this church. And they're good people, but they didn't think it was right that we were opposing the law of the land, and that was that we, you know, those people were not to be welcomed and given places to live. So it wasn't a whole bowl of cherries. There were people who really were against what we were doing, but we felt that was where our hearts were, and we believed that that's what we ought to be doing in assisting people who were having to flee their homeland.
I remember, Will, you telling me your concern for not dividing this church at that time
That's
because of the differing viewpoints and not forcing it to a vote of the congregation,
That's right.
but respecting people's varying views and doing what you felt was right and respecting the other congregants who did not want to go that direction. So that was a gift to the church community that you did that. You showed us what you believed in, but you didn't force that upon the wider group. Is there anything else you'd like to say about that time period, about the sanctuary movement?
It meant a lot to us. We were so glad we were doing the work we were doing because it really meant a lot to us, and it meant a lot to them, of course, the people we were helping. But I would not change a thing about it at all.
I just want to say, I want to give so much credit to Jane for what we did, because that was a scary situation. To be able to, you know, have people come and stay who were on the run, and the authorities were after them, and some people I know would have said, no, we can't do that, we can't have them staying in our house. And so it was wonderful that we could be together on that, and we could do what we felt was the right thing to do. And we understood why some people felt that we shouldn't be doing that, because it was against the law and this, in our country to take in refugees that were fleeing from Guatemala and El Salvador. So we appreciated both the support. We also understood why people in our church opposed what we were doing.
And you were connected with people at St. James, the Methodist Church, the community church, that were all involved in that time
They
period.
had sanctuary groups. There were sanctuary groups throughout Davis. The Catholic Church, as you said, and the Presbyterian Church, the community church, Methodist Church. Person that many of you know was Jean Beckett. She was a stalwart worker in this program. She was so great to work with, and
Is still.
is still. That's right. So yeah, it was an exciting time, and we were glad to be a part of it.
I'll tell one quick little story. We knew somebody was coming into the Sacramento airport who was a person who had been hunted for, and it was kind of a dangerous thing, a Guatemalan, two of them, I guess. And so we went out to the airport to help meet them and be sure they got home all right. And the priest at the Catholic Church, whose name I don't remember now, was that Father Coffee?
Could have been Father Kenny.
I think maybe Father Coffee.
Coffee? Okay.
Father Coffey,
And he
yeah.
opened the church so it would be ready for us to go right there from the airport and get right into the church where the police would probably not come in and get all of us. But I remember that so well, and being so scared. But it worked out fine.
What traditionally happened then that the churches, anybody who get into a church had sanctuary.
Exactly.
And this is what the other churches, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
What you're saying is once someone could get into the church, then they were safe. The authorities did not go into the churches. So once we could get someone into whatever the church was, that then they would be safe.
All right, why don't we transition now to the time period of Rutilio Grande, which was the peasant community in El Salvador that you became actively involved with Cynthia Kellogg, Terry Turner, Carolyn Sugars. Would you like to tell us about that and how that came about?
Sure, go ahead. You can do it.
Well, it came about very easily, really. And everybody worked very hard to get this thing to work. And it took a lot of people to work very hard. And so we built up a good community effort with the other churches. It was wonderful, and still is.
One of the things that was satisfying was that working with people throughout the community from various churches. That was really satisfying. We felt good about that people, as we say, from the Methodist Church, from the Catholic Church, community church, Quakers. It was really wonderful working with all of these different people. That was one of the most satisfying things for us, was that, and the people we got to know from these various churches.
And my question is, why Rutilio Grande? Why that specific community did you associate with? Was it one of the communities where the indigenous people have been prosecuted?
Well, what happened, Susan, was that when there was terrible oppression in El Salvador, that many people fled, indigenous people, poor people or peasant people, fled and they went into Nicaragua. And they were living in sort of, refugee communities in Nicaragua. And when that period ceased, then they wanted to go back home. And that was difficult because many people in countries in Guatemala and El Salvador didn't want to have some of the people come back while others did want them. So it was a matter of, people here giving transportation and supporting those who wanted to return to their homelands. And like Terry Turner and Cynthia Selenchek were two that were very active in helping people go back, actually providing transportation. So that was a exciting time, and also for some somewhat scary in being involved.
Will, didn't they have to go
Yeah.
back with them?
Excuse me?
Didn't they have to accompany refugees for their own safety?
Yeah, people would be accompanied by whoever went there, whether it was Terry or Cynthia or myself or Gene Beck or others, we would accompany them as a return, because that would help prevent them being arrested and picked up if they had a gringo or a gringa accompanying them.
And Will, you served as an independent journalist observing the 1990 Nicaragua election. Is that correct?
Yeah, that was so long ago, I don't remember the specifics. I think I did, Susan. Yeah, they put some sort of a badge on there that says you're a journalist, and that was kind of funny because I was far from a journalist. Jane was the journalist in our family.
All right, great. Also during that time period, I remember Annie Suter, a member of this congregation, who was very, very active.
Right.
She was a registered nurse and had projects going in Nicaragua using the book called Where There Is No Doctor.
Right.
And she was training many of the laborers and farmer peasants in that area about medical care. Can you speak to that time period?
Yeah, and that book was a wonderful book, Where There Is No Doctor. And Annie worked very hard. Annie was involved, she was a Peace Corps volunteer before that, and in Ethiopia and, is that right? No, I can't remember where else. Anyway, she was very involved in the whole thing. I'm probably going to say something more, but I can't remember now.
Okay. Will, did you want to talk anything about Annie's work there?
I guess it's a good time to make a commercial pitch. I think if you're interested in some of the things we're saying, get a hold of Jane's book. She wrote a wonderful book based on her letters home. And I think you can get it down at Avid Reader. So it really tells a lot of things that we, of course, couldn't share today, but gives some of the excitement of being involved in the sanctuary movement. And again, I think we got people who didn't like the fact that we were working against some of the authorities, but you make a choice and you go with it. This is in a way not connected, but in a way connected. But I want to tell a fun story about an experience that I had when I was playing football at Berkeley. I was playing under a wonderful man by the name of Pappy Waldorf. And we were going to Washington, D.C. To play university, flipping,
Army, maybe.
Navy.
yeah, I think it was Navy.
Thank you,
And
sir.
while we were there, we were going to stay in a hotel. And I think it was in Washington D.C. We're right alongside. And we had 3 black players on our team. And when we went to the hotel that we were scheduled to stay in, they said, well, those 3 black players can't stay here. Well, Pappy said, well, then we won't stay here. They went to another hotel, same thing. And Pappy told, at that time, who was in, it was from California, who was back there.
Governor Warren.
There you go. Warren was there. Pappy told Warren, and this was a big game, University of California, Berkeley playing Navy, right? But fill the stadium, 80, 90,000 people. Well, you know what Pappy said? These players can't stay with my team, no game.
Ooh.
Whoa. What an impact that had. Can you imagine all the politicians scurrying around trying to figure out, they had big parties planned and everything. But this was Pappy. These guys are on our team. We all stay together or we don't play. Well, we stayed in a hotel and Len and the 2 other black players were with us. So I know that's just a story I like to pass along about, that some people take a stand. And Pappy wasn't, he wasn't on a platform doing this, but it was just a simple move. No, we don't play. If our team can't stay together, we don't come back and play. So no game. I just love that story, and I love that about Pappy, that he stood firm. He had those UU values.
So Will, your career here at UC Davis in the physical education department, you've coached football, you've coached baseball, and later on soccer.
Tennis.
Tennis.
That's right.
So you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I had a wonderful time coaching all those sports. And I love tennis because, then you're coaching the men and the women's team was playing right alongside her, so that was nice. With football, you didn't have that. So I enjoyed coaching the tennis team because, you've got the fun of having the women playing alongside. So I had so many good years coaching and teaching at UC Davis. And again, I had the support of people like when I wanted to go back there at Washington, D.C. Supporting, I had the support of people like Chancellor Morak, Jim Meyer. It's a good group of people, and I was pleased to be able to be a part of that organization.
Which game was your favorite, Will?
Excuse me?
Which game was your favorite to teach?
Which game was your favorite?
Which sport was my favorite? Oh boy, that's a tough one. That's a tough one. I think soccer was probably one that I favored the most because it was international betting. it was people from all over the place, especially from, South America, and Central America. We had lots of kids come out that were from those countries, and so probably soccer was maybe most favorite because of that. It had an international touch. So, I was lucky. I was fortunate to. I know when I wanted to go back to Washington D.C. to about the Peace Corps, program. It was great because Mark said, "Yeah, we'll give you leave. You go ahead and go," and I was able to go. So with that kind of support, it made it possible to follow your heart, and I greatly appreciate the support I got from people like Jim Meyer and Emo Marak, because it was unusual for somebody to say, "Yeah, I'd like to take 3 weeks and go back and be a part of this program that was going on in Washington, D.C."
Yeah, you might talk about the time as Dean of Students, too.
I couldn't hear what.
When you
Talk about your time as Dean of Students.
Yeah.
Yeah, the thing that comes to mind, Scott, about my time with Dean of Students was we were there was a big, at that time, it was about 1969, 68, 69, and there was a big rally outside of Rack Hall, thousands of students, and it had to do with forming groups, like gay students forming a group, being able to be acknowledged as a group on campus, and other groups asking for recognition. And I remember that I was standing next to Jim Meyer, who was the chancellor at that time, and we were up in front, and there was thousands of students, and they wanted to know, they were asking for that recognition. Is he going to support the gay student group and recognize them as a recognized group on campus? And I was standing next to Meyer, and these thousands of students were yelling, "We want Meyer. We want Meyer. We want Meyer." And Jim had only been in the position for about 6 months or a year, and he turned to me and he said, "What do you think I ought to do?" I said, "I think you ought to get up and say, 'I'm with you.'" And so he did. And boy, the place went crazy. The only problem for Meyer was that he had to approve the gay student group that wanted to form, and he did. But it was that was an exciting time. That was about 1968, 69, somewhere in there.
All right, why don't we talk now about your activities housed here in the church a little bit more, besides the sanctuary movement. I'm thinking of the Peace and Justice Committee that you were so active in, both of you, for so long. You told me that you really were not a founding member of the church, but that you came shortly after the church was founded to the community, right? And through that long affiliation, you brought many distinguished speakers to this audience and this congregation. I'm thinking of, in particular, Cindy Sheehan, the anti-war activist who camped out outside of George Bush's ranch, brought her to speak to us in 2005 at Freeborn Hall. You brought Dennis Kucinich as a presidential candidate in 2004, who was representing a completely different point of view than George George Bush Jr. was after at that point, and he spoke down at the Varsity Theater. You brought Mike Boehm of the Madison Quakers Peace Park, representing the My Lai incident in Vietnam, a group of veterans who had gone back to Vietnam to make amends for what had happened in that time period. You brought Lisa Faulkner of Children's Hope to speak on Haiti, and many other speakers. Can you tell us a little bit about what jogs the memory of that time period?
You go ahead.
I can tell a funny story because we were talking about it last night. Kuz Sinnott was speaking on TV last night, and I said, do you remember when he stayed with us and his shoes were taped together with the, what's that kind of tape?
Duct tape.
Duct tape. And we laughed about that, and he just hadn't had time to go out and buy some new shoes. But I'll always remember that.
The only thing I can remember was it was an exciting time, and we got lots of support from people like people in this church and throughout the community. And you know, anybody knocks Davis, they're going to have a fight with me, because this to me, was a community that provided support to those kinds of things, which in many communities were not supported. And I was so pleased that we were here and could get support for supporting, for instance, a gay student group. I was acting dean of students at the time that was going on, and there was some opposition to that, but we got it through, and they formed a group, and they're probably still active as of today. I don't know. Be interesting to find out.
They talked to my course.
What?
They talked to my course.
Yeah, you can come.
Human sexuality.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, let me pose this question to you now. How has your life of service, which we've heard much about today, service to others, been supported by your UU values?
Well, I'll be honest with you, I can't quote the statement as it is in our bylaws, but what the UU meant to Jane and me and why we connected was the thing we've been talking about this whole time, and that is the respect for individuals, support of people with a variety of whatever their sexuality was or their political beliefs. There was room in this church for those people. And that to me is what connected me to this church. The fact that the church stood for respect for people, regardless of their backgrounds or their sexuality or their political beliefs. And to me, that's what Jane and I felt were important about this church, and I still think it is, that we can accept people of all backgrounds and all beliefs and come together and still be friends, even though we might differ or disagree with each other on some important aspects.
Many of us in the audience might wonder, particularly those of us in the audience that are 40, 30, 20 years old, might wonder, how did you two get so big? And I mean big in spirit. How did your spirit get so expansive?
Well, I think the life-changing experience for both Jen and me, and I think I can speak for her on this, was when we went to Malawi in 1965, and we met wonderful people there from all over the world. Plus, we got to know what real poverty was. We got to know people who were extremely poor, who were wonderful human beings. And I know that had an impact on both of us. Kind of people that didn't have anything to speak of in terms of material goods or material values, but they would give you that dinner with the food that was the only food they had. They would invite you for dinner and it would treat you so wonderfully. To me, that was the biggest experience that had the biggest impact on my life, was going 10,000 miles to that little country in Malawi and experience that kind of warmth and friendship. And they've always been, you know, just a part of our lives. And as I mentioned earlier, our oldest son Don is in the next country over, Tanzania, working in development work there and working with people. So it's hit all of our kids, and Scott back there and Rick and Mike. All of them have been connected, been affected by our experience in Malawi. And you want to give a one sentence statement back there about that?
Yeah, I think I taught all of us about the importance of giving, you know, some sort of volunteerism, whether it's in your community. I'm involved in my community. All of us. Rick gives back through his music and fundraising and stuff that they do. So that's wonderful. You should also, Dad, you should mention your mom and the influence I think that she had on all of us. You know, you included during the Japanese internment during World War II, and she was a piano teacher, and she had a number of Japanese American families that took piano lessons from her, and so when they went to the internment camps, she kept their pianos for them. They're the most prized possessions that they had, and when they came back, their pianos were safe. She kept them in her basement, at friends' houses, took care of them, played them to make sure they stayed good, and she went to visit them at they were keeping the internees from the Bay Area initially at Tanforan at the racetrack, keeping them in the stables and the stalls. And she would ride the train over there and go to visit them, and also went to visit them up at Tule Lake in Manzanar. Made the trip and took gifts and toys for the children and for her pupils. So I think that had an influence, that kind of giving had an influence on, you know, on my dad and on all of us.
Thank you, Scott. I'm glad you brought that up. Yeah, I do remember that my mom was placing all the pianos of the Japanese people who were interned, you know, down on the peninsula. So she would bring the pianos to the church, and nobody would argue with her or tell her she couldn't do it, because she was the organist and she didn't get paid. She did it voluntarily. So I remember her saying, "Well, if you want to get another organist, that's fine. But if you these people are going to be able to store their pianos there, as far as I'm concerned. And if you don't want that, why you can find yourself another organist." End of argument.
I was gonna say, Dan came last week to a co-op, and he says he missed the peanut butter cookies. He was there last week in the deli,
Oh, your son Don
Don.
missed the peanut butter cookies at the co-op.
He came, yeah, he told me maybe I'm missing the peanut butter cookie. He's in Africa now.
Yeah.
I think now is a good time to open this up to our congregation, our audience here, to take questions. And as you ask your question, I'll repeat it so everyone can hear it and we'll hear their responses. Who has a question for Will or Jane?
I guess I do, as I, know you and know about your lives, there's a question of the decision to put yourself in danger. Like you talk about the sanctuary, you would go down to the state market to make your telephone calls.
Yeah.
Friends of yours would be in jail. And I know you used to worry so much about Will, like when he was off at that election.
Yeah.
And I remember you worrying about him, that you would fear that he was going to allow himself to be arrested.
Mhm.
Like some people would do that and some people didn't. And I just wonder, Will, how that line was there and what did you think about it? Crossing the line to be arrested or not? Keeping yourself out of danger and being responsible.
I remember I had some fears about that, but I also, one of the things that I meant to say today, that in this world in which we have so many difficult decisions to make about whether to be involved or whether or not, I do think we have to be willing to consciously take risks, to say to yourself, yeah, this is a risk. I could be arrested because of this, and say it and realize it and accept it, so that it's not something that you don't want to recognize. And I think we did that. We realized that in a sense it was some things we were doing were risky, and it was to a certain extent scary. I think there were times when we were afraid or scared, they were going to get apprehended by the authorities. But we felt we were doing the right thing and helping people who were being persecuted in their countries, and this country was a sanctuary for them. And this church supported that idea as far as I'm concerned. We had a lot of support there. Maybe a few people didn't think we were doing the right thing in opposing maybe the country's stand or laws, but most people supported it. Yeah.
I want to know about, you could speak for a second about protesting at the School of Assassins. How many times did you protest at the School of Assassins, and were you arrested, and do you have a story from that? The School of Assassins?
The what?
The
School of the Americans.
The School of the Americas.
Oh, School of the Americas.
Or famously known as the School of
Yeah.
Assassins, where we
Yeah,
train people
right.
to go back and assassinate people in that country. How many times did you protest there, and were you arrested?
Oh, how many times was I arrested?
I don't know.
Yeah, many people in this country, and the movement opposed the training that went on in the School of the Americas, was back close to Washington, D.C. And that school trained people to go over to various posts throughout, especially about Latin America, and support policies which basically, opposed supporting refugees who were fleeing for their lives. And so, we did protests and did demonstrations at various places. I think I went once to Washington, D.C. I can't remember exactly what the situation was, but protesting the School of Americas. And that school was, again, training people to go and continue this opposition to supporting the indigenous people and being able to bring them to this country. You want to say anything about that?
Other questions? Yes, Terry?
I have one about, so how did being arrested affect your professional life? In other words, did it cause you to be fired from your job, or what was the effect on your life of being arrested?
The impact of being arrested, what was the effect on your life?
Well, the only time I can remember in Contra Costa County getting arrested, I probably got arrested other times, so that I can remember. I can remember that one, and you know, I must say that it didn't affect my position or my job at the university at all. And I give credit to people like Jim Meyer and Chancellor Marak that they didn't go to the various committees and say, you know, these people were violating the laws of the land. So I really appreciate the attitude that people had at UC Davis. I certainly wasn't the only one. There were lots of people who did that. I think of how.
They can't hear it. Just put the mic close.
Excuse me. Okay. So, yeah, I just didn't, I guess I probably have it'd be interesting to see my record. Somebody can tell me how I asked for that, but I'd like to look at it because I was apprehended. I don't like to say arrested. I was apprehended several times in some of these demonstrations, and I'd like to see what was on the record. I probably have a lengthy record, but I've never seen
So
it.
do all your friends. Your friends. Guilt by association. Yeah.
All right, I think at this point we will wrap our time together with one last question, and then we'll have informal chit-chat afterwards. And I want to thank both of you for sharing so much about your life odyssey, your journey with us today. And there are many pieces about you I didn't know that I learned, and I think the congregation could say that as well. My last question to each of you is, what is it about your life or your connection to this church that is so precious we wouldn't know to ask about?
Wow. That's yours.
I think it's too long a story. Well, let's see. Actually, my birth mother died when I was 4 months old. She was hit by a car in Berkeley and killed. And that's always been very hard to talk about. And but I was only 4 months old. I was just a baby. And then, to my great luck and my great admiration, the sister of my birth mother, she and her husband took me and raised me as theirs. And they hadn't even been married very long. It's a big sacrifice to suddenly take on a baby. And so that was something that has always meant a lot to me, that they did that. I could talk a lot more, but I won't right now.
Very precious story.
Yeah, I think, I know what attracted me to the Unitarian Church was the fact that people had a respect for individuals regardless of their political views or their, their sexuality or who they were. I loved the openness, the fact that people of all shapes and sizes, beliefs could come here and be in a church together. I also like what I'll admit. I also like, it reminds me of a comment my mother made after she came to church once here and I'm driving home. I like the fact that we didn't follow the word from the Bible. That we did, we developed our own wording. And my mother, when she noticed that we were driving home, she said, "Willard, I didn't see any Bible up on the stand." I said, "That's right, Mom. We don't use the Bible to direct our worship. Not that we can't quote from it, but it isn't like it is in the Baptist. I was brought up in the Baptist church, a little different from the Baptist church. So my mother accepted that because she loved me, not because she wanted to agree with it, but she kind of shook her head and said, "Oh, okay." So that's what got me here to the UUs, was the great individuality that this church brought together, and the fact that individual beliefs and thoughts were welcome. There was no one belief system or one theme that had to be accepted by everyone.
And we pray to whomever, who may, who.
Whom it may concern.
To whom
And on that note, you've certainly been mentors for me, both of you, and we so much appreciate the time you spent with us today and the fact that your three sons could be here. And let's now give them our warm appreciation.
I just want to correct to their three sons.
Three sons.
Rick, Scott, and Michael, and the fourth one, Don, as I said, is in Tanzania.
Thank you very much.